Good evening, everybody. G or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. This is number 60, where I am in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So hi from Ulster, Julie from London, New York. Hi, Jamie from Ohio. Welcome. So let me know where you're from. Hi, Ferdiad and Dan from Germany, Belgium, Canada, Ireland, Missouri. Wonderful. Lovely to see you all. Crouch End. Great. Washington States and from Chiron. Hi, Salve. Lovely to see you again. And Pennsylvania, Richmond, Vermont, and Northwestern British Columbia. Lovely. Wales. Great. Massachusetts. Wonderful. And New Jersey, Yorkshire. Lovely to see people across the Atlantic because it's daytime there, and also people this side of the pond. So it's just lovely to see you all, and blessings of the solstice to you. I hope you all had a lovely solstice. I spent the day in Knockrow, where we have in South Kilkenny here, where we have two passage tombs aligned to the winter solstice, one to the sunrise and one to the sunset, which is rare to have two passage tombs on the one side with two such alignments. So let me go to High Wycombe tonight to introduce my guest this evening. It's Shawn Hayes. And those of you who were watching the Eisteddfod at the weekend at our winter gathering will be familiar with Shawn. He was our wonderful, amazing MC for the evening. Shawn, you are so welcome to this Fireside Chat.
Hello, Eimear, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to chat to our friends, our fellow druids around the world.
Welcome. So you now are in High Wycombe, and I know you said it's near the M40, but when somebody tells me that means nothing.
Okay,
so where are you?
Where am I? Well, I'm here. I'm here, and this is now. So if you imagine you're looking at a map, and there's London, and then coming out of London, going right the way across to Wales is the M4. And then next to that is the M40 that comes out of London and then bends up towards Birmingham. And if you go along the M40 for 15 miles and come off, you'll come to High Wycombe. So not that far from London and not far from the M25 corridor, and not far from Oxford, and right next to the Chiltern Hills.
Okay. So what's the landscape like, and what's so high about it? Is it on a height?
Well, no, we're all on drugs, basically.
Ah, okay.
No, it's called High Wycombe, and there is actually a smaller place that I discovered after a while called just Wycombe. So High Wycombe is an area of 2 or 3 valleys with quite high hills around.
Okay.
And most of the house building and that is along the valley part, but there are also roads running up onto the hill. And where I live, I'm living in a block of flats, but it's one of these wide, not tall flats. Mm-hmm. And it's built on the side of a hill, fairly high up. And so there are 2 paths that run up to the block. One goes across the front of it, and that's like a ground floor entrance. But if you take the other path, you go up even higher and go round the back. And there is another entrance to a ground floor flat, but it's above the one below, if you know what I mean. So
yes.
It's one of those funny little things. So I live there, and I suppose the most druidic thing is the area, because of the valley. There's a lot of thermal activity, and red kites, which are slowly spreading all over the country. On a sunlit dawn, you'll hear them cry and look out the window, and there'll be a dozen, maybe up to 15, circling around, like buzzards around, somebody that's popped their clogs or whatever. But that's what they're doing. They're just climbing up and looking for breakfast, I guess. And they're lovely, and they're big. And a couple of times when I've been looking out my front room window, my lounge window, one has sort of flown towards and then just come towards my window and then gone up and over the roof. And just for a moment, I see very close up a flying big bird of prey, you know.
Wow.
Almost, they look a little bit like a bald eagle in some ways. But what a beautiful bird. So that's a gift I didn't expect when I moved here.
The closest I've been to kites, we have a few here, but in Tanzania, where we were having a picnic beside a water hole, and I had a piece of chicken in my hand. And then suddenly I didn't. And I said to my friends, did I not have chicken in my hand? They said yes. Kite just came, gone. I was aware of a slight shadow and a little whoosh sound. Nothing, didn't even feel it coming from my hand. You know, anyone could have gaslighted me and told me that I didn't have anything.
That reminds me when I was in St Ives with Marion and Stuart. We were having a bit of a holiday down there, St Ives Bay, and we went down to the little town and the harbour. And Stuart, in an unusual moment of generosity, bought us all a Cornish pasty. So I'm walking along chatting with this pasty in my hand, wrapped in a bit of tissue. And I just held it like that. And suddenly something hit my hand and I jumped. And the pasty had been sort of spiraled up into the air and two other seagulls following had grabbed bits of it. And I hope you don't mind me swearing, but I was so incensed. I was running down the harbour wall shouting, "Give me back my pasty, you bastard!" And everybody was laughing their heads off. But yeah, so I know the feeling.
So there's lots of comments here about where you're living. Salve says that, hi Wickham, you're surrounded by 12 hills.
I haven't counted them, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And then somebody said, Salve again, red kites were released from John Paul Getty Estate at Wormsley. And yeah, somebody else said there's another place. West Witham Village is an amazing place to visit. Is that near you?
I'll make a note of that.
So it's interesting. People are paying attention and they're listening.
Bless them. Yeah, I mean, I'm here because of work, but my family and my spiritual home is still in Southampton, and the Sylvan Grove that some of you may have heard of. We meet near to the village of Burley in the New Forest, and I still maintain that link and still go down for all of our. It's about 70 miles, I suppose, but you know, I rarely miss one. So that's definitely, I think, where I'm going to go back to when I retire eventually. So I certainly don't have any desire to start any other grove or join another grove up here. You know, so that's still my spiritual link to everything. So yeah, but it's my sister and her husband have a business that I joined, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and I moved up here permanently about 5 years ago. So
okay.
So yeah, so once I'm done with all that, I'll probably move south again.
Back home again. So
back home again.
What's the New Forest like, and how does it compare to where you are?
Oh, the New Forest is quite different. I don't know if everybody knows, I mean, if you're abroad, you won't, but Southampton, which is my main city, I was born in a little village just outside the New Forest on the forest side of Southampton Water. So if you imagine the Isle of Wight as an island on the south coast, and in front of that, there is a narrowing strip of water called the Solent that slowly moves up into becoming a river. And along that river is Southampton Port. And on one side is the main building of Southampton going up towards the top of the river. And then going round the other side, it's fairly undeveloped. And you have the New Forest more or less coming towards that. So you can be in Southampton and literally in 15 minutes on a clear road, you can be entering the New Forest National Park. And then you've got this large area. It's a bit broken up by places like Lyndhurst and other villages and main roads, but but there are still some wonderful areas there. Broad-leafed enclosures, and also pine plantings, because when the New Forest was given the status after the First World War, after it had been depleted somewhat of wood, it was protected, but they were told that there was no money, so they would have to fund themselves. So the Forestry Commission planted loads of tracts of cash crops of fir tree, the usual sort of thing that we all see on mountains and hillsides everywhere. But in the last few years, it's had its status has been upgraded again, and it's attracted funding. So as this last generation of pine are taken away, the land is being cleared and then planted with deciduous broadleaf trees, so that more and more of the forest will become a more natural forest and contain oaks and beeches and holly and a few rowan and lots of other bushes and trees and things. So it's a work in progress, really, but there are areas that have always been maintained as old forest, and it's in one of those areas, in an enclosure called, I don't know if I should say actually. Anyway, in an enclosure in the forest, that's where the grove meets, and we have a beautiful beech tree that blesses the clearing where we meet. So, yeah.
And any wildlife there?
Oh yes, yeah. There's ponies, like they get on Dartmoor. They just wander wherever they want.
Oh yes.
They tend to be owned by various historic people that own land, own property around the forest, and they're recognised. They dock a little bit of their tail at different lengths, and that signifies who is responsible and owns them.
Okay.
So it's a very organised thing. There's a thing called the Verderers Committee, which is made up of local people, and they have their own laws and traditions and various things that go on in the forest. So as well as getting planning permission, if you were doing something to your property, you'd have to talk to them as well. You also get pigs wandering along the side of the country roads, particularly around the autumn. There is a thing called pannage. The pigs are let out to eat the acorns.
Okay.
They're very rich in fat and various things, and it's good for the pigs. And equally, it's good for horses, because if horses eat too many acorns, they get ill. They get an intestinal problem. So the pigs serve a couple of purposes in doing that. And then the other main livestock that you see in the forest is deer.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 or 3 different types of deer there. And if you're very lucky, every now and again, you'll see an albino deer, i.e. a white buck.
Yes.
There's one there at the moment that I've seen, so it's always a magical
magic when you see them. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, Shawn, what brought you to Druidry?
It's easy when you've been a druid for a while to sort of think, well, I was always a druid, I just didn't know what it was called. And there is an element of that. But I suppose being born close to the forest and as a child in the 50s and early 60s, running with, sometimes with no shoes on and climbing trees, and mum giving us a bottle of water and some sandwiches or something, and be home before it's dark. And that was usually, this is 9 years old, but different era, And we'd go off and we'd meet up with other kids from the village, and the older ones would they'd be carrying knives, and yet there was no threat about it. The pen knives were used to make arrows for our bows and arrows and to cut things and to whatever, and the older ones would show the younger ones how to use them, and we'd look after each other, and we had rope swings and things like that, and it was quite idyllic until I was about 10, when we moved into Southampton. So I always had this connection with the hedgerows and the old farms and the deserted buildings and different things that you find on country land. When I was older, when I was in Southampton, there's this marvellous area called Southampton Common, which is about 140 acres and 3 lakes, and there's tree parks, and there's big parkland areas with football pitches and cricket pitches and things. And me and my friends at that time, we used to go up there with our bikes and go tracking, as we called it, just in and around the bushes and chasing around and being sort of wild things, you know. So there was an element of that country style living that I could still follow up on there. And then life intervenes and all sorts of things happen. But when I got to my mid-40s, I was connected with a group of friends who had a, you know, it's like when you've got friends, there's usually somebody's place you congregate in.
Yes.
We used to meet at a place called Rose Cottage with 2 lovely friends that I had then, and we'd watch Star Trek on, you know, the Next Generation Star Trek, and things like that, and we'd share a few herbs and things. And we would often, in the summer, we'd go off in the evening for walks into the forest, and we'd come across a lightning tree, and we'd come across various things, and we had names for all of these different little areas where we'd go. And one of the guys was very keen on us all having a name, and so the guy that lived in the cottage with his partner, we decided he was Nemtar, guardian of the 4th gateway or something or another, which meant absolutely nothing, but meant everything to him, you know. And they called me Merlin because of my, I suppose, my healing connections, and I was very connected to trees and getting more so all the time, you know. So they called me, they understood something of it because they called me the Merlin of the group, not Merlin, you know.
Yeah.
And that kind of reflected something of my attitude, and I started buying books on stone circles and tree lore and tree magic and things, and this thing called OBOD kept popping up in the appendix, you know, for more information, why don't you get in touch with these people, you know. And eventually I just did.
You gave in.
I gave in, and I got my, in those days you got an introductory pack and you could return it and get your money back. And the last of the 4 Gwers was the initiation. So, you know, they drew you in. But I was perfectly cool with that, you know. I joined. A couple of friends in the group followed me in within a couple of months, you know. And that was that. And funnily enough, in a couple of months, I will have completed my 21 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so my apprenticeship will have been completed.
Is this 21 years in the order or 21 years since you went into the drill grade?
No, 21 years in the order.
Okay, so what year was that?
2000.
Oh, okay. I joined in 2003. So
you're just a stripling.
I just a young one. Yep.
I joined when I read about it. The thing that I wanted to be was an ovate. That's what chimed with me. So I did the Bardic in a year and a day. I thought it would be wrong to do it any shorter. So I did the year and a day. And then I joined, then I initiated into the ovate, and I stayed in there for about 7 years. And then took me another 5 years. Took me 12 years in total to work through the grades. Simply because there were times during that when, especially when we were developing the grove and things, I was actually living the ovate rather than studying the ovate, you know. And it's how it should be, really. You know, some things you learn and some by reading and studying, and some things you learn by experiencing and developing. So I was just happy. I'd have stayed in the ovate forever if it had been up to me. But I got kicked up the backside by Marion and Anne, who are the 2 druids of the grove.
I was going to say, I don't imagine who would do that to you.
Because although I was in the ovate, I was fairly, I don't know, I brought something to the party, let's say.
Yes.
So the 3 of us were usually the conspirators that were developing things. And they said to me one day, they said, look, a lot of people have joined our grove now, and they've worked through the Bardic, worked through the Ovate, and they're getting towards the Druid. And if you stay in the Ovate, there's going to be Druids who are going to be more in a position to want to do things, and you'll lose your authority. So you better think about it. So I thought about it, and 2 years later, I finally got into the Druid. So, yeah, and it's been a wonderful, I mean, when I say I completed the course in 12 years, you know, and I know, you never complete anything. And
no, it goes on and on.
You just carry on and on and on. Yeah. You just have
It's
different tools in your backpack.
That's right. Now, and I know I've had some people, guests here, who went back to the Bardic grade. Or sometimes someone will have said, I did the Bardic grade 3 times, I did the Ovate twice, going back. And I mean, like you, when I joined, I was no bard. I couldn't tell stories. I couldn't write poetry. I couldn't do anything. And I was doing all my Ovate stuff in terms of my training, all during the Bardic, and took 7 years in the Bardic grade because I struggled. When I look back now, there was no need to. But anyway, it happened the right way, you know.
Yeah,
so,
it's all there for a reason, isn't it?
So the other grades I got through much easier, much more smoothly. But I started telling stories after I'd handed in my review, my at the end of the Bardic grade. That's only when I started telling stories. And then I started at the end of the Ovate, or during my Ovate, I had picked up the harp. So the Bardic thing came. It was, to me, it was like a triple spiral, just spiraling in, spiraling out, nothing in a straight line. Which, you know, everybody's journey is different, and that's what's lovely about the order. You can do that.
That's right. The lovely thing about the training with OBOD is it's not prescriptive. It's opportunist. It simply says, have a look at this, have a think about that. Maybe you'd like to do this. If not, maybe you'll do it later. And you just find your path through it, and you do it in the way that you want to. I know Darv, when he completed, he reinitiated as a bard, and that's where he stayed, because that's what he resonated with, and he's Darv the Bard, you know. So I mean, I might one day do the Bardic again through the prism of Druid. Just haven't got the time to do it at the moment, but it's an interesting thought to do that, and I can understand why people have. Because the Bardic is actually one of the most druidic of the grades, really. When you realise it's a very powerful grade, particularly through the OBOD Guernsey. There's so much there.
Somebody asked the question, what trees do people tie cloth on for healing? And how often should you tie a piece to the tree for someone's healing? Because I think, as you mentioned, healing.
They call them clootie trees up in Scotland. And I'm not sure. I'm not even going to guess. I've never thought about what type of tree it is. I think it's a locally significant tree, and there may be more to it than that, and I'm sure somebody will come through and tell us. The clooties that I've seen, particularly at that place I can't remember in Cornwall.
Oh yes, yeah. St. Nectan's Glen.
Oh, thank you, St. Nectan's Glen. Yeah, the one there. People often will tie, you know, if they've lost a child, there'll be a little baby's booty, or there'll be a football scarf. You know, you never know the story half the time. Sometimes there's a note inside a bit of plastic hung up, or a ribbon. It may be somebody's done a ritual and empowered something that they then hang on the tree. And it's very much, because the tree is living, it's like a prayer to Mother Earth. It's a prayer to the land through the roots of the tree. That's how I've always seen it. That gets carried on the wind and carried into the roots of the tree. And I think you can make anything sacred, like, because basically we are what makes things sacred. There is nothing sacred in the earth other than what we make it, because we designate it as something that moves our spirit, that has something particular about it. To nature, it's all the earth. I know there's some places where birds like to go, and some places where animals like to go and they feel at home, and there is that to it. And often that will be because there's water, or because the grass is particularly lush, or there's just a good safety feeling there. might be more to it than that, but sacred is something we tend to do, I think. So make your tree sacred by using it.
Here
Same
it's
with growth, you know.
here it's mostly hawthorn, as far as I know, that are these. I want to come back to that thing about sacred. And here, you're better off putting something organic, and something that maybe can disintegrate, because something there's around prayers that whatever you create, once that has rotted away, then your prayer will be answered, type of thing.
Yeah. I think plastic's not a good idea.
Now, I mean, I know I was in St. Nectan's Glen and I got a ribbon in the shop, which would have been synthetic, your satin ribbon. And I hadn't noticed the other things, but I'd noticed lots and lots of ribbons. But in other, we call rag trees here, but it's that clooty tree. Sometimes people put shoes and all sorts of stuff for various reasons. So they're not biodegradable and they stay. And so, it's like there's always that tension between, do you do something clean, pure, organic, put it there, and then you have this need to have something that belonged to somebody who's passed, or you have another intention. So there's that thing about keeping neat and tidy. But I want to come back, because you said it's an interesting thing. It's we who make places sacred. And my question was, do you not think there is an inherent sacredness in places anyway?
Well, that's an interesting question, because if you find somewhere that has that very special feeling and you decide this is going to be where our grove is, then obviously you've met something that's attracted you. Now, whether the universe would say, yes, you found a sacred place, or whether it's a place of earth energy, a place of balance, a place of all these other ways of describing it, but it moves our spirit in a way that makes us want to call it sacred. Of course, there is something there anyway. I'm not saying there isn't, because there's something there that attracts you. But to me, for as humans, we make something sacred because of how we act there. And if it's a sacred place, we will do a ritual, or we'll sit there and commune, or we'll meditate, or we'll tend to it in a very respectful way. And through our actions, we demonstrate that it's sacred to us. And that's a different thing to just coming across somewhere that has a good energy. And that's why I think it's a human thing to make it sacred, rather than, shall we say, an energetic place. Or
that's really interesting, because when, like I just said earlier, I was in Knockrow, where these two passage tombs are aligned to the winter solstice. And it is aligned to, from Knockrow, where, as you can see, Sliabh na Mán, which is the mountain of the women. And there's a cairn at the top of that. And then over the other way, there's a stone circle on top of a hill. And all of these, and then there are other sacred sites that surround this valley. And it was interesting, the archaeologists said, this is not a sacred site because they built this. They built it because it was a sacred place. And I think because I think it's a dance between the two, Shawn. I think it's a bit of both. So you go to a place and there's a resonance for you that may not be for me. And you say, okay, this is the place. And then you do a ritual or some kind of ceremony. The land responds. It deepens you grow it, I think. Because I know there are certain places that people have a strong affinity with that I don't. There's nothing for me. Just like with people, you don't resonate with everybody you meet. And there's some that you really click with instantly, like you do with places. So I think there's a dance between the sacredness. And Hannah says, personally, I think everywhere has an inherent sacredness, but people connect more to different places.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment.
And Andrew says, I think it's both depending on the place. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Well, if you take
Go on.
If you take Stonehenge, for example, it's on a slightly elevated, fairly flat plain, and it has a landscape that's interesting. And interesting when you look at the archaeology of the area, the archaeology of Anglo-Saxon villages and earlier villages, they tend to stop, they peter out before you get to Cadbury and places like that. And the landscape beyond that doesn't have any, ancient historic remains of villages or of places. It was always a sacred, going back 4,000 or 5,000 years, it was always, that whole large landscape was always seen as something different. And we know that because they built their sacred sites there and they didn't farm it.
Okay.
Equally, Stonehenge has, that particular place has certain special qualities. For example, it's on a line of latitude, and there's only 2 lines of latitude in the northern hemisphere where this is true, where, somebody will correct me if I get this wrong, but you'll get the spirit of it, where the shadow caused by the midsummer, by the solstice, summer solstice sunrise, that shadow, if you were to track it across that piece of ground, and then if you take the midwinter, the winter solstice, and the shadow that's formed there at the sunset, those 2 lines meet.
Okay.
And that might, make an impact on people or might not, but it's not true. If you stick a stick in the ground to mark that point of summer solstice and you mark out the line that the shadow makes, you follow that line. And if you do the same with the winter one, in any other place, those 2 lines won't actually meet. They'll just be 2 lines. But at Stonehenge, they meet. And so that means that you can build something there that will work at both solstices. And so they chose it well. And
wow.
I think some of the things that, because Stonehenge started off as marker posts and then bigger posts and then stones and then bigger stones, and they knocked it down and built it and knocked it down and built it. And I think the great Sarsens and Trilithons came in fairly late on. But I think as their knowledge increased, I think the knowledge of all these different elements that that unfolded as they were working with it over, several, 1,500 years, something like that, when they were building it. I think their knowledge increased and they realized more and more, oh, but if we put it there, we can, and if we do this, we can do that. One of the most fascinating things that I was lucky enough, when they reopened Stonehenge to the public in 2000, King Arthur came to our Glastonbury assembly and asked, would druids in robes come? Because he was so worried that there would be trouble, because it all ended in trouble with the Battle of the Beanfield and things, and then nobody was allowed in for many years. And finally, English Heritage were persuaded to have a public thing, and I think they sort of felt perhaps that if there was trouble, that would shut everything up for a while. And so we were called peace stewards, and we had to wander around the site, and there was 20,000 people or something there, I think, on the first one, and just be a calming influence on the whole proceeding, which we did. But there was something, I've kind of forgotten why I started saying this now, but there was certainly something in the stones. There were people drumming. You couldn't get in there, it was so compact. There were people drumming and there were various things going on, and the place was just alive. It was totally buzzing. I don't know what else I want to say.
We're talking about is lands inherently sacred.
Bless you. It's come back to me now. Anyway, at that particular, I think it was that one or the next one we went to, it was a clear night and the moon appeared. And I think we were down by the Heelstone, which is one of the marker stones outside Stonehenge that aligns with the summer sunrise. And the moon came down and it sat on top of this little stone that was just outside the Stonehenge circle, and it just sat on there for a little while. A bit like at Callanish with the reclining goddess and things every now and again. And it just sat there for a while before it went away. And then I think they'd only recently discovered, because I read about it afterwards, that this only happened once. I think it's every 11 years or 12 years or something. But somebody at some point had said, we recognise that, we'll put a stone there to mark it, over that period of time. And given that it's not always a clear sky, I mean, goodness knows how long it took to get it right. And they're still discovering things like that. It's just incredible. So that is a sacred site, and it's a sacred site to many different spiritual groupings. I mean, the Beaker people, as they're known, were around when it was built, not Druids. They were more like a Celtic nomadic group. But I'm sure that they operated very similar to the way the early Druids did. They would have shared a fairly common practice in many ways. So although Druids themselves weren't noted at that time in terms of the label, it was very Druidic, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Philippa says, there are certain places that have an emotional resonance. I agree. I wonder if it has contained the energy of those who've done rituals in the past.
That is something that I'm very keen on. It's one of the developing things that I've worked with. I believe, I mean, I'm more of a between the worlds person than anything else. The healing that I do and the rituals, the spiritual side, or my spiritual side, is very much connecting from the nature here to the nature there, if you know what I mean. And I believe that when there's a developed spiritual civilization, let's say, for example, the mythical temple of Atlantis, and let's say that existed for a very long time, and there was the inner temple, the outer temple, and people have channeled all this information, and it's built up like we really know the place, but we don't, because there was nothing that remained. And yet it's very difficult to say it's just fiction. I mean, I know one of the Greek writers, I think no, I can't remember which one now, Aristotle or somebody, wrote about Atlantis and waxed lyrical about it, and whether it was his fictional vehicle or whether it was something he'd read from something older, we don't know. But I think that's where the original reference comes from. But anyway, I believe that if you work in the right way in a temple, in particularly with stone, because it resonates and it absorbs and holds, and I think it will mirror into the astral world, into this world that's linked to the earth but is just one step removed. Sometimes people talk about the mists, the grey mist of the astral world. It's very much comprised of thought forms that we create and ideas that get seeded there as well as here, if I can put it like that. It's very much linked to us. And I think what happens then, or what can happen, as these civilizations die away, and then much later somebody comes along with a similar calling but quite different, quite modern, like modern Druidry, for example, and they start meditating and doing rituals in a certain way, and suddenly they seem to know a lot of stuff. Suddenly there's a wisdom that comes through, and I think it's because they link in some way to this other energy that's still there, sort of laying dormant, and as they wake it up by their harmonic convergence or whatever, in terms of whatever the key is that links it, some of the essence of the wisdom that was stored away comes back. And I think that's why things like mystery schools and things, they can be put down, they can be wiped out, you know, a bit like the Gnostics and the Cathars, all those sort of things. But somebody comes along at a later date and suddenly they connect to it and it all makes sense, and they start writing stuff and it starts to connect, and somebody says, oh, that was written 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years, oh right, okay. And their instinct is informed, let's say, to some degree, and then reshaped for the modern times, because you don't want to be one of these people that believes they're Cleopatra or the one of the great pharaohs. But if you link to the energy of the pyramids and of what drove that side of things, then you might feel something that's relevant to today in some way in terms of your expression of it. And I feel that's happening all the time, all around us in different ways. And certainly with Druidry, I think, particularly when Newen broke away, I can sense that something happened with OBOD that linked through from somewhere much older. And I've found it with some of my writings, with the work of people like Dion Fortune and Butler, who took over from her. And some of the things that I read in there, which I didn't really discover till my 40s, but it was stuff that I had independently come to understand myself. Not putting myself in her bracket, but you know, I'd be reading one of her novels, and it's like, yeah, I've always accepted that. That's, yeah, you know, and it's a lovely little aha moment. You know, you feel you're not alone. You know, somebody else has connected with it. So I think these things happen all the time. You know, that's why spiritual novels are so wonderful, because you relax and you let your imagination fly, and then something in there triggers you. You know,
That's right. I say, Ferdy, it says, I sometimes think it's like the paths we wear on the land. The more people who walk that path, the clearer it becomes, and the easier it is to follow. And I think that you, being in an ancient site, that something becomes clear to you. After enough time, people will walk that path because it's been there for ages. And that's...
I totally agree. And you can move ley lines. I mean, ley lines will follow. I mean, I'm talking now not of what's his face that wrote the straight
Watkins.
path. Yeah, Wilkins.
Wilkins. Yeah.
Sorry?
Watkins, is it?
Watkins, that's it. Yes.
Watkins.
Is it Herbert Watkins or something like that? But he wasn't into if you like, the spiritual energy of the land. He was just looking at Ordnance Survey maps and connecting churches and monuments and sacred hills and finding straight lines that ran and ran.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'd always assumed it was something like an energetic line he was talking about. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's and like the Michael line that runs from St. Michael's Mount across the country and disappears into the sea over on the east. And in more recent times, they discovered that's where that Woodhenge thing that got unearthed when the sea went out further than normal, and they found all these tree stumps that linked up. Well, he worked that one out simply because there were so many churches of St. Michael running across the country in pretty much straight line, and running into Glastonbury, into Avebury, and dowsers later found it was going into Tilbury Hill and out again, and being energized.
And the Tor.
And the Tor, yeah. All of these things. But beyond that, dowsers have then picked up these energies as energy, as something that you can follow, as well as following it on a map. And we have a ley line near to the Grove. It's about 100 yards or so from our grove, and it's a small local one connecting through, because there's a lot of burial mounds on Bewley Heath and around that area, because it's quite an ancient area, and a lot of it's not been built up because it's just poor quality land, you know, thank goodness. But we have found that line, and we've kind of been aware of drawing it to us a little bit, because we in the early days we didn't know what to do with the energy we were raising at our rituals, because we felt it quite tangibly. And some people said, well, can't we send it out for healing, or can we read people's names out and different things? And I've never been totally comfortable with that, because you get so many different ideas of what should be sent and what colors and what energies. And it's a bit like when you're a kid and you're making poster paint and drawing on an easel with your apron on and things, and you learn that you can add 1 or 2 colors and mix them and they make something else, but if you add another one, it just goes brown and horrible. And I've always felt that, you know, you can have too much of a good thing coming from too many places. So we decided that when we researched about the ley line, that without having to say anything, we would just, as the circle is unwound, we would feel the energy we'd raised going down into the earth and being drawn to the ley line and the dragon lines, as we call them, and from there just going out into the landscape locally and beyond. And our desire would be that anyone that walked the land and walked those sacred pathways, those sacred lines, would have the potential to draw healing into them, or inspiration, or whatever, but they would draw it to them rather than having it imposed on them, you know. So we've always done that, you know, for the last 16, 17 years or whatever our growth has existed. So I'm totally with pathways and ley lines and energies and things. It's very much what I'm into, and our grove, I think, as well.
Beautiful. So it was Plato who wrote about Atlantis.
Oh, Plato. Yeah, that would
Alfred.
be right.
You began with an A, Alfred Watkins, who wrote about the ley lines. Salve says, Dion's grasp of the esoteric resonates deeply with many of us that fully immerse the Michael Mary lines, often referred to as the Son and the Serpent.
That's right.
The floral corresponds to much of the Icknield Way that drums through the Chiltern Hills north of where you are. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something that I've only been here since April, and just settling in and getting the flat up together and things. I haven't visited the landscape, and I think you need to kind of settle first anyway, but I fully intend into 2022 to, I mean, I've already researched, I know where there's some nice walks and various things going on, and and if there's a pub at the end of it, I certainly intend to take some sacred walks, you know, and drink the sacred nectar. So yeah, that's something that I really look forward to doing next year.
Absolutely wonderful. So you've mentioned healing, and I know, although you went through the bardic grade in a year and a day, that you are a bit of a bard. So have you anything you'd like to share with us this evening?
No.
Of your bardic
yes, I have
gifts.
I'm teasing you. No, I'm glad to have the opportunity. How long have we got, Eimear? Is there a time limit?
We have another hour.
We have another hour.
Well, this is meant to last an hour and a half. It never does. So.
Fair enough. Well, particularly during my overt years, I tapped into.
I'm going to interrupt you. You have Paul Mitchell viewing. Welcome, Paul. Something rude, Shawn. Go on, is what he's requesting.
Go on.
I am not encouraging you. I'm just passing on his message.
Well, Paul Mitchell, you come and do this and do as much rudery as you want, and you've got enough rude songs to do that. I will do what I do. Thank you very much. But lovely to link with you, Paul. I hope your good lady and family are keeping well. It's been too long since we've got together and I've heard you sing.
Absolutely.
He's an interesting man.
He is, and he says 3 X's.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, so I suppose all through my druidry, I've been drawn by the energy more than the academic side, although you have to have both. I had a lot of experiences as a child of out-of-body experiences, sleepwalking, all sorts of things going on. And my mother sometimes used to get me to stand on a box and reach over the top of her armchair and put my hands on her shoulders, because they would get very hot and it would make her feel good, you know. And at the age of 8 or 9, you don't take on airs and graces. You just do it. You know, you love your mum and you do it, and you give her a little massage and whatever. And I was often on my own. I would often be, you know, dragging a stick along the lane, or talking to myself, talking to the trees, and just living in this imaginative landscape. And I'm so blessed with that, because I've never felt lonely when I'm on my own.
Yeah.
I felt lonely when I'm not understood, when I'm not with the right people, but I've never ever felt lonely on my own. I've always entertained myself. So I had that in me, and in my early mid-20s, I got involved in spiritualism because of wanting to learn about healing more in a more formalized way. And the local medium, who was like the resident medium of a local spiritualist church that I linked with, she looked me up and down and invited me into her development circle, which normally she wouldn't do unless you were over 30. But I obviously calmed her off out of the trees, and she invited me in. And I went there every fortnight for 5 years. And she taught us a lot of different things. And she would always do a path working or a guided meditation, as she called it, same difference. So I was learning all of those tools at quite a young age. And every Wednesday she'd do healing in her house. And she'd have 3 stools in her lounge. There's only a little terrace house, and 3 stools in her kitchen. And she'd have two healers on each stool. And people used to come from 20, 30 miles away. And she never, in all the years I knew her, she never accepted a penny for it. And there was always a cup of tea and a slice of cake for anyone that wanted to stay to the end, you know. Yeah. She was a wonderful woman, and she taught me so much, directly and indirectly, about so many things. And eventually I moved away from that, and I got into psychology, and I started reading about Jung and Freud, and I did a diploma in welfare studies, which included counselling, different forms of counselling, and I sort of got into that. And then I was trained as a hypnotherapist, and I was sort of linking one thing to the other, you know, and learning my trade. And you will do what I tell you, Eimear Burke.
Absolutely. I've been doing it ever since.
I know, and you're wonderful at it. And I kind of linked all these things together, and all of this happened before, you know, Druidry. And so when I started getting more involved in the energy of the trees with the help of 1 or 2 stimulants that grow naturally in the forest, etc., it was all there, you know. The connection was just wow, you know. So this is it. And just the connectivity that I felt sometimes from me to a tree to the forest, it was seamless, you know. It was amazing. And on the end of all that, I came to Druidry, and it was the first thing that I discovered or found that didn't start off by telling me to leave all the baggage at the door and read this rule book and this is how it's going to be. Instead, Druidry said, wow, you've got loads of diverse things that you've done. Bring them all in, because it will colour your Druidry and it's part of your path. And don't let go of anything. Just bring it in and make your Druidry out of that. Nobody said that to me, but I'm just saying, you know, that was the feeling I got.
Yeah.
Because of that, I felt I'd arrived at home. I felt I'd arrived. And so some of the poems I'm going to share with you, they talk about that inner energy. And I just wanted to make the point that it's funded from a long way back with me. But my voice, my poetic voice with these particular poems was formed as a Druid, you know, when I came into Druidry. So, and there's one, I'd like to share a story with you as well, actually. I've written a few little stories along the way, you know, like you do. but it's the poems that really really happened, and they would come to me in different ways. Sometimes I would meditate, and I'd come back, and it's a little bit like if you lose your memory and then it comes back. You don't have to download off a tape all that memory and spend the time rerunning it. You just know it's back. That particular time, you know, if you got hit on the head or somebody has a stroke, and then suddenly it just comes back. And sometimes when I meditate, that's what happens. It's like something lands in my head, and it doesn't have any words, but it's a sense of knowing that I then write very quickly, and it's all done in 10 minutes, you know. And sometimes I wake up with an idea, and sometimes it's something that somebody says, or it's something that I have to work on. So anyway, here's the first one. It's I wrote this in 2009. So I suppose that was just as I was leaving Ovate into, well, I didn't leave Ovate, but when I was just focusing more onto Druid. And it's called A Druid Song. So if you're out there, Darv, you can put it to music if you want. So I'll just do this so that I'm sort of looking at you at the same time. Most of my poems are quite short. You'll be happy to hear. So, I am the servant at the temple door. I am the raven. I am the claw. I am a priest from far Atlantis. I am the wisdom of the praying mantis. I am the teller of the magical lore. I am the shaman on the sunset shore. I am the Merlin serving his queen. I am the healer of the terrible dream. I am the one who calls out your name. I am the druid, guardian of the flame. I am the circle around the great lake. I am the wanderer who stands at the gate. And the wanderer at the gate is something that appeared 4 or 5 times around that time in different things. And I can't really explain to you what it is, but it's just that sense of nomad who's looking over the gate at something, but not going in and stopping there. That kind of thing. I've always felt a bit like that, a bit nomadic.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. So, and here's another short one that I wrote at Immalt that year. Now is the stirring of the cauldron, the choices that we make, the moments of our living and the promises we break. Now is the vision that we look on, the words that we all say, the forming of our spirit, the living of the day. Now is the reason for my actions, the world that I create, the person stood before you, the wanderer at the gate.
Oh, beautiful. You're getting some lovely reactions here.
Oh, good.
And Liz Cruz says, wish I'd known you were on, Shawn. I'll have to catch up on this.
Oh, hello, Liz. Blessings to you.
And Liz was a guest some months back. And Adrian a few weeks ago. Hello, Eimear. Yeah. Hi, Shawn. Love you. Remember the Dion Fortune Druid Grove with the fire of Azrael?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we went up to that from Glastonbury out to the coast. I say we. I don't think I was involved. We did one at a retreat actually, but Penny and Marion and a few people went out there and did an Azrael's fire and floated it out. For those that don't know it, it's a little tiny little thing that floats, made of 3 different woods, and you set fire to it and you float it out, and it links to Azrael, who's one of the archangels, who had particular significance, I think, with Dion. And forgive my one is a tree from the Middle East, and then, you know, my memory has got so shockingly bad.
The cedar?
Cedar sounds like a very good idea. Do you know the other ones?
Well, Cedar of Lebanon is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
So,
Well,
so
anyway,
there's two other woods from the Middle East.
yeah, probably. And you would build this thing on the shore as the tide was coming in, and it would burn for a while, and then the sea would come in and pick it up and take it away. And there was a significance in the way you did that. And if you want to know more, you'll have to look it up, because my memory just won't work for me. It was a while ago now.
Andrew Newton. Do you know Andrew Newton?
Oh, of course, yeah, Bear, yeah.
Oh, that's Bear. Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't know his name. I just
right.
he was there for that, or for a fire of Azrael. So, and Andrew, well done, Bear. It's juniper, cedarwood, and sandalwood. I thought it might be sandalwood and juniper.
Excellent. He might have done it at Avon Tyrrell in the forest when Marion and Anne hosted the Druid Gorseth, because I know they did some work at. There's a lake there, and I mean I wasn't in the Druid then, so I wasn't involved. I think I turned up to cook the food and then had to go away again. But I think they might have done something there, so that might be what he's referencing. I don't know.
Okay.
But anyway, hi Bear. Hope you're keeping well. So this next one, if it's okay to keep going.
Please do.
This is one of my long, well, it's not that long. It's about 8 or 9 verses, just 4-line verses, you know. But when I read this recently, it sort of occurred to me that it's even more relevant now than when I wrote it. And you'll see what I mean when I say it. And it's called, I mean, I don't mince my words. This one's called Merlin at the Wanderer's Gate. So that theme is up front and central. So, O Merlin at the Wanderer's Gate, stand there and say it's not too late. Between the worlds the veil grows thin. Oh, will you let us in? Magic, magic everywhere, by spit and blood and cut of hair. The old ways gather next to new, yet still we wonder what's to do. The tide has turned, the wheel does spin, the forces gather both out and in. This land so long been held in chains, yet hark, she comes, she calls again. Great goddess, lady of the lake, the sword in hand for him to make anew the oath and stand, to serve, to die for this our land. The intellect that led us here, the mind of man so sharp, so clear, can this now join our souls and see the greatest act of alchemy? Can we, the Druids from of old, unite to form a golden soul at this great time of prophecy when wrong does try to kill the tree? A soul of future born of strife, spirit of tribe, not just one life, the light we need to show the way, lest ego's madness makes us pay. And so to each of us in turn the chance to serve. Oh, do not spurn, for future children do depend, that we now let this madness end. Hands joined in circle, Arwen's made, the mind made still as spirits prayed, and Merlin, eyes so deep and wise, throws the gateway open wide. O Merlin at the Wanderer's Gate, stand there and say it's not too late. Between the veil, between the worlds the veil grows thin. Oh, will you let me in?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. So, what other interests have you in Druidry? And we can come back. Hopefully, I know you have more. You seem to have a big tome of writing there.
There's more. There's 2 of these.
So Kit Carr says, "Great poem, Shawn. Merlin at the Wanderer's Gate. Loved it." So, great response to your poetry. So, what are the things that are important to you around, or that you as a Druid do, that you'd be happy to share with our viewers?
I have a role in the Grove. I'm I'm the Pendragon of the Sylvan Grove, and pretty much have been since the early days. We took our labels from OBOD. So Marion was the Modron, and Anne Coleman, who's now living in Scotland, she was the scribe. And the three of us formed a triumvirate through which things developed. And to begin with, we used to hold the circle quite tightly, and our roles would be like, I would always cast the circle, and we'd do different things, and then the members would get involved in the sacred rite in the center of ritual. And then after a while, we decided that we had to transition ourselves and the Grove, and so we started to relinquish those ritual roles that we had, as the members became more and more adept themselves. And so we had some little U roundels cut, and we put all the parts of the rituals into that. And every time we'd let the spirit of the Grove decide who was doing what.
Wonderful.
And we went along like that, except at Samhain and at its opposite at Beltane, we still do it the old way, and particularly at Samhain. I think that stands for itself. But in other ways, the Grove, the members have gone forward, and it's one of the things that I've always been very keen on, which is to encourage the members not to listen to me and my sense of Druidry, but to know that there is a sense of it for them to find, to walk the land, to read, to study, to do the gwers. I mean, we never talk about the gwers at the Grove. We never study them together or anything. I know some do, but to me, that's all part of an inner landscape, an inner walk for the members. But we do other things. We do ritual workshops that we've designed around our rituals. And we do an annual retreat over a weekend. And we'll do a path working and a ritual, and somebody in the Grove will often have a session where because as we always find with Druids, when you ask them what else they do, they're so rich in the talents and the things that they do. One of our members does, the great big gong. You can have a healing bath of gongs.
Yes.
Great big hanging ones. And suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I got those. I do that. Oh, blimey. Well, let's bring them along, if you don't mind. So we're all laid on the floor, and she starts doing this thing.
Magic. Yeah.
For nearly an hour, we were just floated away. As far as I was aware, she was an accountant, and she was a member of the Grove until it came up, and enabling people to bring their various bardic and ovate skills through the Grove is something that gives me a lot of pleasure. And to see bards join as bards, and at some point in the future become druids and complete the druid.
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest compliments that we all can have. And we've got 7 or 8 graduate druids now, never mind people in the druid, and lots of ovates, and we get new members coming in as bards still, and it's nice to see the Grove mature like that.
Liz Cruz says, I think allowing spirit to determine aspects of ritual has many virtues. The OBOD rituals are great in terms of providing a safe structure within which unique things may happen.
Absolutely right. One of the little, as well as poems, I write little, I don't know what to call them, little sayings, little pearls of wisdom, if you like. Sometimes I call them dehydrated essays, because I'll write something, and when I finally really understand it, I can say it in a sentence.
And they're nice. Nice and juicy if they're dehydrated. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if I think about that little pithy statement, I can then talk about the whole essay. It's all there for me. So just to echo what Liz just said, one of them goes, never be afraid to find new expression for the old truths, but know the old truths first.
Absolutely.
And that's what OBOD gives us, I think. one of the gifts that it gives us is it gives us that connection from which we can then flourish, and it keeps the druid flowing. Go on.
This is and this is an issue, I think, for many of our members, because so many of our members are solitary practitioners. And Franny says, what should those of us do who don't live near a grove? I'm new to the Bard grade and I often feel very disconnected because of this. And I'm sure you're not alone in this, Franny. Do you have any words of wisdom to offer this?
I think what tends to be a great fulcrum for people, like, what was her name again? Did you say Annie?
Franny,
sorry. What really helps, Franny, is if you ever get the opportunity to go to, say, a weekend gathering, one of many that occur in the States, as they do in this country, and you get the opportunity to stand in circle and feel the energy, that is a gift that you can take away with you. And that feeling that you get, you can then meditate back into that energy, and you can imagine people that you respect and trust taking the quarters and doing things, and you can hear them saying their quarters in your mind and you say your bit, because if you go around doing all of it yourself, it gets a bit schizophrenic after a while. So that's a good way of doing it. And also, I don't know where you are in the Bardic, and I don't want to say too much therefore to preempt it, but there is a description of a grove, and there are such things as the Bardic Grove of OBOD, the Ovate Grove of OBOD, the Druid Grove of OBOD, and then there's the collective OBOD Grove. And these are all things, harking to what I said earlier, these are all things that people focus on and develop. And although they think they're developing their own inner Bardic Grove, they are also implicitly connecting and feeding to the center, to the Bardic Grove of OBOD. And you'll find as you go along that more and more it will be easier for you to feel you are in a held circle, and that you can gain those experiences. But very much I would recommend, if you can, get to not an online one, get to something that's live somewhere and stand in circle, and just experience that for a weekend. It will nourish and fulfill you in ways you wouldn't imagine. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, she asks, thank you, that is what I need. When will these start back up? Will they be listed in the website? I don't know where you are, Franny, but Tara, McCormack, she said Dore was her first camp, and that was this past year. And so wonderful to meet my chosen family. So it depends on where you are, whether you're in Southern Hemisphere or the UK or the US or Canada. So just say where you are. So, okay, yeah. So it depends on where you are, but there's East Coast, there's Dore, there's Magus in the US, there's Gulf Coast Gathering, and I think there might be one on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think there is.
She's Pennsylvania. Well, that's Dore is where they hold Dore in Pennsylvania. So, so you're not too far away. So anyway, the best.
One of the great things of Facebook is if you go in on OBOD, go in on Druidry, and just see what comes up. All of these gatherings will inevitably have a Facebook page. Just find your way through the minefield of everything that will spring up in front of you, and you'll find it. And also on the OBOD message board, there's often different groups will advertise there, if anybody wants to link up. And I think it's one of those things that when you take the mote out of your eye, as they say, when you take the log out of your eye and you open your eyes with an expectation and a hope, you suddenly start seeing these things. You sort of attune to it, and suddenly, you can't get away from it. So they're there for you. You'll find them. And if the worst comes to the worst, then start a seed group yourself, because you don't have to be a dyed-in-the-wool druid grade to start something. Some of the best groves have grown from 2 people in OBOD for a matter of months deciding to register as a seed group, advertise, 2 or 3 more people come in, and they all gel, and the rest is history. And I know that from experience, because I used to facilitate the the groves and seed groups around the world and answer the questions and supply the information, etc. That's now been handed over to Pat and to
Paul.
Thank you.
I mean, my story is that I started off, I knew nobody. So Howard and I started outside in our grove. I 15 minutes in, not knowing my west from my east. I just thought, well, there's nobody to do it for me. I'm going to have to do it myself.
Yeah.
And I did. So.
And you're a bit of an old soul, if you don't mind me saying, Eimear. And I'm sure this stuff came to you quite naturally and easily in a lot of ways once you got into it.
Well, it did, once I got into it. But it's just interesting at the beginning. I mean, I was used to facilitating things, but it's interesting, you know, to be moving from facilitating something. Now I'm a Druid, a member of a Druid order, but didn't know anybody in it. And it was over there in England. I didn't appreciate how global it was until I started going to the gatherings. And I remember you were the first, I think you're probably the first person I met in the town hall. And I discovered that your parents were Irish and your dad was still alive then. He was in Tipperary.
Yeah.
And then later discovered that your mother went to the same school as me, but not at the same time.
No, that would have been awkward.
But I remember how friendly you were, because I wondered, Irish, how these are all English people.
Yeah.
Are they going to be friendly? What is it going to be like? And no, people were incredibly friendly. I found such a home there. So
good.
Thank you, because I remember you were the first. And Liz Cruz says, I cut my druid teeth in a seed group, Tameside, and I had many wonderful experiences with them. They're still going in London and have a Facebook page. And then Ferdiet says, running a seed group is the best on-the-job training you can get. So go for it, Franny. Oh, it's Tamas's, not Tameside. Okay. So Liz was in that. So
the Tamas group. Yeah. I know them. Yeah. So, so Franny, get in touch with Paul and Pat, and you'll find them. If you want to write this down, the email address is groups, plural, groups@druidry.org. And just write to them and they'll send you some material and they'll hopefully encourage you. And it's not such a difficult thing to do. The hard thing is sticking your neck out and meeting strangers for the first time and finding somewhere to meet, whether you want to open your home or whether you're going to do it at some external place. If you can sort that out, meet people over coffee in the city centre somewhere or in the town centre, meet them socially and get to know them, and say to them right up front, we need to gel if this is going to work, so let's get to know each other. And that takes away the fear of bringing people in who then take over or suddenly introduce you to ideas you're really not keen on. Take it step by step and you'll be surprised. If it's meant to be, it will grow and flourish.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, this is a quote from Jesus, where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst. And I think that has a universal application, that where two or three are gathered in ritual, Spirit is there. And it's not about getting it right. It's about being together, connecting with the sacred and each other. And then it develops.
Yes. It's a gateway. It's a portal. That's what you're making with your circle, and opening the gateways of the quarters just reinforces that. And the people stood in the quarters become living gateways then, and all sorts of lovely things start to happen. But, you know, that's for you to discover. So best of luck, Franny.
Okay, she says a little scary, but okay. I'll also look into the gathering near me. Very excited about that. Go for it. Good night, lads, Franny.
Yeah, good. I look forward to meeting you one day and you can tell me how wonderful your group is.
Absolutely. So Liz has to go and supervise Christmas pudding boiling. Actually, no, Bannacht is correct spelling, Liz. It's one blessing. I say Bannachty, which is the plural. But thank you very, very much. Wonderful.
Save a slice for me, Liz. I look forward to seeing you hopefully next summer, if all this craziness allows us, at Eimear's coronation.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Oh, any more poetry then?
Yeah. Do you want poetry or would you like a story?
Oh, a story. And we can
Mm,
go back to poetry later. Yeah.
okay. So this, when did I write this? This was a bardic thing. Yeah, 2001. I wrote this in my first year of OBOD. So it's called Druid Magic. And I suppose it plays to a degree to my sense of magic being something that we're involved with psychologically, intellectually, as well as that sort of part of it. I think the greater part of magic and the greater part of druidry is actually synchronicity.
Mm-hmm.
Things happen because you're there at the right time and you don't know why you're there at the right time, but you are. And synchronicity with the earth and with the seasons and with the weather, it's all part of what is a druid to me. So, are you sitting comfortably?
Absolutely.
Then we'll begin. It was a pleasant summer afternoon as the old druid made his way down the familiar forest pathways to the campsite. He had been invited by a group of city folk who were getting away from it all. They all had a common interest in the old ways, but had been drawn from a variety of belief systems, mainly by the advert in the local pagan newsletter. The camp organizer was an old friend of his, and she often relied on her friendship with him to add a little spice to her camps. As he drew near to the camp, he passed the small farmyard and noticed they had acquired a new youngish dog. A little highly strung for my liking, he thought. He also noted the wind direction and the clouds in the distance, and he felt pleased that when asked, he'd opted to stay in the hut this time and not the tent. A full moon always got his attention one way or the other, and he hoped he would see this one before the clouds built too heavily that night. Either way, he could feel that inner tingle that told him this full moon would be one of those special ones. He arrived at the site and, after introductions, found himself a quiet spot, lit his pipe and relaxed. Following the evening meal and with dusk falling, the campers set about constructing a bonfire in the usual place. An hour later, most of them were sat in a circle around the fire, passing bottles of wine and other items between them. Someone started playing a drum and soon everyone was contributing their sound. After a while, it quietened down, and the old druid stood up, stepped into the circle, and began slowly moving sunwise, stopping to say hello to one or two familiar faces. He spoke to them of the moon, of the druid path, of the seasons, and of his love for the earth. Then someone spoke up from the circle and said, "Speak to us of druid magic, if you will." Oh, he thought, I'll do that all right. And he chuckled out loud. He began moving purposely around the circle, seeming to catch everyone's eye as he passed. He stopped, looked up to the now cloud-covered sky. He sniffed the air, and then he peered long and hard into the fire, and then he walked around again. Suddenly, he stopped and said with a commanding voice, "I will show you druid magic." And he stretched out his hand to the fire. After a few seconds, the fire suddenly collapsed in a shower of sparks. He then raised his arms to the sky and invoked the moon. Almost immediately, the clouds parted, and there she was. He then called upon the spirit of the wolf, which started to howl from somewhere close by. And then, just as he seemed finished, he turned to the sky once more and called for rain. It rained for 3 seconds and then stopped. The druid bowed, and then walking the circle once more, he said, "Was that magic? or is this?" And with that, he clapped his hands, and the people jumped. And immediately they all saw that the bonfire was now back as it was, blazing happily. Some moments passed during which no one seemed to breathe. And then the person who had asked the question asked him to explain what had happened. He pointed into the fire and told them that the main log in the fire was precariously balanced against a small twig on the side of another log. He told them to look, and as they did, it suddenly glowed very bright for a moment, and then the fire collapsed. He told them to sense the wind, and they felt it slightly freshen. As it did, the clouds broke and the moon appeared. And he then explained to them about the dog down the road, and how he felt it likely that the sight of the moon would excite it. Finally, he told them to hush, and he pointed to the nearby trees, and they heard the approaching shower on the leaves. And with that, the old druid clapped his hands once more, and the fire was whole again. Just then, a few campers who'd been out walking joined the group around the fire, and they asked what was happening. The old druid said that the people around the fire had something to show them, and with that he withdrew. So they looked into the fire, and seeing the twig suddenly brighten, they called upon the spirit of fire, and the fire collapsed. They looked to the heavens and commanded the moon to appear, and it did. They called for the wolf and heard a dog howl. They shouted for rain and banged their drums, and it rained for 3 seconds. "How on earth did you do that?" the newcomers asked. "Druid magic," they all replied, and laughed. "Ha!" thought the old druid to himself as he walked to his hut. "The real magic was actually yesterday when I dreamt all this." And with that, he entered his hut just as the thunderstorm began.
You do know that the Irish word for druid and magic is the same.
Is it really? I didn't know that.
For druidry and magic. Driocht.
Right. Driocht.
Dri is the Irish word for druid, but driocht is druidry, and it's also the same. It means magic as well.
Right. That first part, dri, that's also common to other ancient forms of language, isn't it? Druen and different things, I think. Probably all comes from Irish, because the Irish are so good at these things.
Of course. Well, started with us. It's a lovely story. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Beautiful story, spellbinding, hand claps. Wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's funny, although I'm on the stage at Glastonbury twice a year, I think in all the years I've done it, I've only ever read one poem, because I think we had to fill in for some reason, and I said one. And I sometimes share a poem or two with the Grove or at our retreats, but I don't know, it's just something that for a long time I just didn't feel that there was a performer in me, that I was a writer, not a performer, but in recent times, and tonight has also shown me that I can relax and do this sort of thing, that I might sort of look to doing a bit more of it now. So
I think you might, because you actually you have a very nice spoken voice, and sometimes some poets can't read they don't do a good job of reading their own poetry. They need somebody else to do it. You do it well. Now, somebody else further up the chat suggested you should get your books, your poetry published. I think it might have been Jules Weaver who said that you should publish your books, your poetry.
Yeah, it is something that I've considered and looked at from time to time, and I think perhaps now is a good time ish, that's not very druidic. Here's a nice short one. Again, I wrote this in 2000, very early on, It's called I Stand Before the Oak.
Mm-hmm.
I stand before the oak and become the forest. I step into the fire, my sparks are the stars. I leap and become the sacred wind. That's it.
Oh, that's lovely, but too short.
Yeah.
It's really,
Sorry about
no, it's beautiful. It's like I could feel myself being in there, drawing in. It's just beautiful. Yeah.
And I wrote this one back in 2005. It was the 60th anniversary of the passing of Dion Fortune. And a group of us organised to have a dinner at Mosiman's Belfry restaurant, just off the embankment. It was actually the church that Dion Fortune bought and converted into a place to live, and where she wrote one of her books, where she talks about the priest of the moon and doing a sacred ritual in the bell tower and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I read the book. I can't remember the novel.
It's either Sea Priestess or
it's the other one. I think the Sea
it's the
Priestess.
other one. Yeah, you're right. Somebody will tell us in a moment. And anyway, Moslemans have kept that inner room below the bell tower. They've kept it sacred, and because people sometimes would come and ask to see it, so they've got a little bit of lighting in there and a crystal and things, and they don't use it for dining or anything. And so we did this. We had Philip and various notaries of the order. I think Penny actually organised it, so kudos to Penny Billington for organising it. And we all sort of were invited to bring something to share, and we also did a little ritual. People stood up and took the quarters and things. And anyway, I was Moon Goddess, I called the poem. I was inspired to write this simple poem, and it's connecting the moon, which was very important to her, to her energy as a person, So it goes like this. I'll say it to you, Eimear, because I need someone to say it to, really.
Thank you.
You are my radiant light of moon that shines so softly on my soul, whose countenance, when fully seen, still makes me gasp and lose control. For one sacred moment out of time, I am a god drowning in your smile. There you are.
If only it was to me. That's absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
My
very,
homage to Dion Fortune.
It's wonderful.
Well, I'll do one more, and then I don't know, perhaps we'll talk some more, or you'll kick me out, or whatever. And this one I wrote in 2008, and it's right in the middle of, it's towards the end of my ovate, but it's right in the middle of my my fixation with the Druid energy. It was quite encompassing as it is for a while. Oh, I've got a note here. When I started the ovate grade, do forgive me. When I started the ovate grade, I was a motorcyclist at the time. I got on my bike and I rode the 60 or 70 miles to Glastonbury and went into Chalice Well Garden. Went into the little enclosure, the brick enclosure where the little pool is.
Yep.
Sat on the bench and just released the bardic and connected with the ovate and asked that I'd be guided and this, that, and the other. And 7 years later, I went back as I was finishing the ovate before I did my druid, and I sat in exactly the same place and attuned once more and just felt the difference. And I wrote this, just one of those, out it came. And it's called Let Me Be Found Here. My coming here is but for a short time, and my going a mere moment. But the time before and the time after, that which doesn't include me in this fixed way, goes on and on and on. So for this brief time of being, when I am fixed here, before my going, I will attend to those things which are mine to do. And I will treasure this time, for it is all so short, and infinity's hand has a broad sweep that carries all before it. So before I am lost, let me be found. Let me be found here in my being, in this fixed nature, where I am formed into humanity's grace, here where I give thanks for this gift all my days.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Oh.
So what would you say has been your greatest achievement?
In what? Well, without wanting to sound too I don't know, romantic about it, but in all truth, I think my 3 children are, my legacy to the world, if you like, and they are such amazing beings. They teach me all the time, and they're making their mark in the world. My son has a first-class engineering degree and a master's, and he's working on renewable energy and wind farms and all that sort of thing. So, he gets a thumbs up. He didn't have to do all that, and maybe I influenced him, maybe I didn't, but I'm very pleased that he's doing it. But I would love him just the same, if he wasn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. And I've got a daughter who's got a degree in psychology. She's got a first in psychology and a master's again. I think the 2 of them competed a bit. And she was then a researcher at UCL working for her professor that she did the master's with. But recently, with her partner she's been with for a couple of years, they've started a company. And he's a bit of a, whatever he is, technical person. And he came up with a formula for oat milk that is mixed with something else. He's got 2 products, and the first one is mixed with rice milk and a few other things. It's all vegan and nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't separate. You give it a shake when you open it, and it stays mixed, and it doesn't curdle in hot drinks. And you can make cappuccino with it, and his mission was to enable people to take the milk out of the fridge rather than having the milk and the oat milk, the Alpro or the Oatly or whatever. To, if milk's a problem, then this product hopefully will solve all those problems.
Wow.
So they've only been going for about a year, and they've had one lot of cartons made, and they've just gone out to the marketplace and found some investors to take them to the next level, and they've managed to achieve that and raise a 6-figure amount. And so they're now looking to go to Ocado and supermarkets and health food shops and all those kind of things, and see if they can launch it in a national way. So fingers crossed for them.
Wonderful,
So,
wonderful.
Can I say what it is?
Yes.
It's called Lilk. I know, Lilk. They wouldn't tell me why, but in my mind it's like milk.
I thought it was love milk, but like milk. Oh no, it's not. It's like, as in it's like milk rather than, because I hate milk.
Yeah.
So I have an almond cow. I make my own milk. It looks like an electric kettle, and it's called an almond cow. But you can use oats, rice, any kind of nuts to make milk. And
well, anyway, if you come across it, then
milk. Oh, absolutely.
Milk.
Love it.
And my other daughter, she went down a slightly different path. The eldest one, she's about 35 now, so she got married quite young and had 2 lovely boys. And after some years, the marriage foundered, as they seem to do, especially when you're young. I think she was about 17 when she met him. And so she then embarked on her academic career a little bit later on. and she has done various levels of accountancy, and she's now working for Hampshire Police at their headquarters, issuing gun licenses, shotgun licenses and gun club licenses, and doing all the background checks that you have to do to enable someone to do that.
Okay.
So she's doing that, and there are apparently once you get in, you can then change and do other jobs within it. You can apply internally and things. So she's looking forward to being with them for a long time and doing different things. So they've all followed their path, like the parable of the talents. They've all increased what they started with. So they make me very proud, and they teach me. So that's by far my greatest achievement. I suppose beyond that, in a more general way, what I've learned about healing, starting with my warm hands on my mother's shoulders, and then training in the Spiritist Church, and I call it going through my messianic stage, where I wanted to heal the world, and I wanted everybody to be happy, and and then later on, when I studied psychology and realized that until I delved into myself, I was not much good to anybody, and I realized that it was really that I wanted healing for myself, reflected back from like we do, and there's nothing wrong with that, but one has to have these layers of unfoldment. And I developed some ideas, like I would never send healing to someone remotely unless I had their permission explicitly, because there's something grey about that, and you're making a decision that what they need and what's best for them. And it may be they were born to suffer this particular thing in order to have a revelation, or in order to heal themselves, or one of 100 other reasons. And who are we to intervene in that? But if they turn to me and say, look, I've got this problem, can you help me with it? Then that's different. And then we can talk and perhaps do a ritual, a meditation, and then link remotely. I tend to link remotely with a candle lit in both places, and do a little meditation where there's a candle in the center and things like that. So I tend to look to healing more as a non-touch, non-localized thing, more of a reaching out to somebody, because it's pure energy then. And along the way, there's been some lovely results. One can never know how much of it was you, how much of it was the connection you formed. I tend to say that all healing is self-healing, just as all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So I feel that in some ways I'm giving people permission to heal themselves. I'm giving them the tools to connect with the energy they need to connect with. And I have certain mindsets that I introduce to them. I introduce them to the fact that they've got a blueprint. And it's a perfect blueprint that was a bit like a genetic pattern, but I call it the blueprint of the perfect you. And they meditate, and they let this cover them like a blanket and soak into them. And wherever there's a divergence from that blueprint.
Thank you for so graciously sharing your compassion and gentle humility, Shawn.
Oh, thank you.
So, Shawn, we have gone over our time. So we've flown, and we could talk about so many other things. So we'll have to bring you back at some point. So Hannah says, these online gatherings are important to me to connect and to learn. Absolutely, Hannah. I think so many people have said that. So I'm going to end on my usual question it's two parts to it. What is your favorite season, and what is your favorite ceremony on the Wheel of the Year?
I think my favorite ceremony is Samhain, because it doesn't spook me, but it does enrich me. I find it such an energetic ritual and connection. I'm never in all the times we've done it at the Grove, it always touches me. It's always new and it's always informing, and it's just wonderful to be in a circle with other people reaching out like that, and I love that. In terms of season of the year, I think probably if I had to choose one, I love them all, but if I had to choose one, it's autumn.
Mm-hmm.
Going from the early autumn and the final harvest, which is the nuts and things
Yes.
like that, and then moving into the wonderful golden crown that the forest holds for a while, and then towards the end of that, shrugging off those that dressing and becoming, as the old lady, the ancient one, moves through, and all the trees become dark and almost lifeless to look at, and moves into winter, and just that transition from late summer through autumn towards winter, the colours and the energy of it never cease to touch me. But the spring is wonderful as well, and Beltane is wonderful as well, and what's not to like, really?
Absolutely. Wonderful, Shawn.
I don't like getting wet though, Eimear. I don't like it when it's a very wet winter. Yeah.
It's interesting, in the 18 years plus that we've been holding ceremonies here, it's only ever bucketed rain on us in 18 years, and that was at our equinox. It was World Rivers Day.
Well, there you go.
And it poured constantly. We were all soaked to the skin, and we did our ritual, our equinox ritual, and then we gathered water in a bowl. People were asked to bring water from their areas, put it into a crystal bowl, and then walk down to the river and place the offering and healing into the river. And nobody was cold. And I thought, because normally, even if there's a gale blowing, it'll stop for the ceremony. Now, there's magic.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
remember a number of years ago, for our solstice one, people say that I control the weather. I don't. The weather is really good to me. So it'll stop. So this person arrived, and there was it was a gale out there, wind, rain, and he goes, ha 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 ha. Where's your magic now? Where's your druid magic now? And I said, well, I don't know, but if this is the weather, this is what it's meant to be. So I was going out to prepare the space, and the sky was clear. The rain had gone, no clouds, nothing. And I went back in and I said, can I have a word with you, please? I said, what's that? He said, what did you do? I said, I didn't do anything. So we went off and had the ceremony. And on the way back, we were talking about this. And Howard said, well, it always stops. But usually, he said it'll probably start raining in 20 minutes. And he was wrong. It started raining in 22 minutes. And
what an Egypt.
It's what an Egypt, yes. But it's really, really interesting. And those, when you talk about magic, not that we're wielding it, but there's some resonance or connection or synchronous being, intra-being, that whatever happens is meant to happen.
Everything is connected, and when you feel that, when you feel the connection through the entire universe, from atoms through to suns and galaxies, when you really get that, you can't help but be in sync with it. You just go. Absolutely. Somebody once said to me, everything exists as a complement to everything else.
Beautiful, beautiful.
That's the state that's worth getting to, I think.
I think so, and if we could have more of that. So brilliant. So you hang on. I'm just going to thank you so much for being a wonderful guest.
Well, thanks for the invite, Eimear.
Thank you for a really interesting chat. I enjoyed it immensely. And there's some people wanting to contact you. You'll find them on the Facebook thing. So it's been just such a joy, Shawn, as always, talking to you. You were the first person I met at my first OBOD gathering, and I've always appreciated your friendliness and your warmth, and it's been wonderful. So thank you so much for joining me this evening.
My pleasure. And I must say, there was something about your the lilt of your voice and the look of you that I felt, oh, here's somebody I need to talk to, and then I've never regretted it.
I go on now to that.
Oh, no, you're a lovely friend.
Thank you, Shawn, and you likewise.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put you, you're going to go backstage. So you say goodbye to everybody.
Okay.
And then we
Thank
and I
you
look
for putting up with me, and may all your homes and all your hearths be blessed this solstice. May you find health and the wealth of love from your families, near and far. And I look forward to linking with you all again one time. Good night.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, Shawn, thank you so much. So listen, thank you all for joining us this evening, and just judging from your comments that you really, really enjoyed it. So tomorrow is Christmas Eve, or it's Christmas Eve in the Southern Hemisphere already. Whether you celebrate Christmas or not, I hope that this coming few days are peaceful for you. Here in Ireland, you can't avoid Christmas. In this part of the world, it's there whether you celebrate it or not. So may you all be safe, be well, and I look forward to seeing you next week when I have another guest on. So until then, slán go fóill.